Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Aditi Lumba, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reiterates his call for early cessation of violence in Ukraine-Russia conflict, conveys to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov India's readiness to contribute in any way to the peace efforts. India's President Ramnath Kovind reaches Ashgabat in the first leg of his two-nation tour to Turkmenistan and the Netherlands. Nepal Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba arrives in New Delhi on a three-day visit to India. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar says this visit will further strengthen close neighbourly relations between the two countries. In Pakistan, opposition parties lambast PM Imran Khan for not fulfilling single promise, enslaving country to foreign institutions. And in IPL cricket, Punjab Kings set a victory target of 138 runs before Kolkata Knight Riders at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. The Foreign Minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Friday. Mr. Lavrov briefed the Prime Minister on the situation in Ukraine, including the ongoing peace negotiations. Prime Minister Modi reiterated his call for an early cessation of violence and conveyed India's readiness to contribute in any way to the peace efforts. The Russian Foreign Minister also updated Mr. Modi on the progress of decisions taken during the India-Russia bilateral summit held in December last year. Earlier in the day, the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar held talks with Russian Foreign Minister in New Delhi. Mr. Lavrov arrived in New Delhi on Thursday evening on a two-day visit to India. Both the ministers assessed the overall state of cooperation and considered the implications of recent developments on trade and economic relations. During the meeting, Dr. Jaishankar emphasized that as a developing economy, global volatility in different domains is of particular concern to India. He said it is important for both countries that their economic, technological and people-to-people contacts remain stable and predictable.
This year is an important year in our bilateral relations as we mark the 75th anniversary of the establishment of our diplomatic relations. Despite the COVID-related difficulties, last year turned out to be one of intense bilateral activity that included holding the inaugural 2+2 meeting and of course the 21st annual summit. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin have been in regular touch and have spoken to each other on multiple occasions this year. Our bilateral relations has continued to grow in many areas. We have diversified our cooperation by expanding our agenda.
The two ministers also discussed developments pertaining to Ukraine. Mr. Lavrov briefed the Indian side from Russia's perspective, including the ongoing talks. In his opening remarks before the meeting, Dr. Jaishankar emphasized the importance of cessation of violence and ending hostilities.
Excellency, our meeting today takes place in a difficult international environment quite apart from the pandemic. India, as you are aware, has always been in favor of resolving differences and disputes through dialogue and diplomacy. In our meeting today, we will have an opportunity to discuss contemporary issues and concerns in some detail. I look forward to our discussions.
They also discussed the situation in Afghanistan. In his opening remarks, Mr. Lavrov conveyed his assessment of the recent conference of Afghanistan in China.
We continue to implement projects in the areas of energy, science and technology, outer space, pharmaceutical industry, and of course we cooperated and continue to cooperate in the efforts to fight coronavirus infection. Indeed, as you mentioned, this day our Western colleagues would like to reduce any meaningful international issue to the crisis in Ukraine. You know our position. We do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way. So thank you very much for your hospitality once again.
India's President Ramnath Kovind reached Turkmenistan's capital Ashgabat Friday evening as part of his two-nation tour to the country and the Netherlands. The president was received at the airport by the Turkmenistan president, Sardar Berdimuhamedov. He was accorded a ceremonial welcome at the airport and presented with a guard of honor. This is the first ever visit of an Indian president to Turkmenistan. This visit is significant as it is taking place as India marks 30 years of diplomatic relations with Turkmenistan. The visit is also taking place within 2 weeks of the new president of Turkmenistan, Sardar Berdimuhamedov, assuming charge. President Kovind will hold meetings with his Turkmenistan's counterpart, which will be followed by bilateral delegation-level talks between the two countries and signing of several MOUs. Nepal Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deoba arrived in New Delhi on Friday on a 3-day visit to India at the invitation of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is accompanied by his wife Dr. Arzu Deoba and a high-level delegation. Mr. Deoba met BJP National President JP Nadda at BJP headquarters in New Delhi. He also met External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar expressed confidence that the visit will further strengthen the close neighbourly relations between the two countries. We have a report.
Nepal Prime Minister Deoba will call on Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and hold talks with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday. Besides official engagements in New Delhi, Mr. Deoba will also visit Varanasi in Uttar Pradesh. India and Nepal enjoy age-old and special ties of friendship and cooperation. In recent years, the partnership has witnessed significant growth in all areas of cooperation. Meanwhile, train services between Jayanagar of Indian state Bihar and Kurtha in Nepal, a stretch of 34.5 km, will start from Saturday. East Central Railway Chief Public Relation Officer CPRO Birendra Kumar told AIR that Prime Minister Modi and his Nepal counterpart Sher Bahadur Deoba will jointly inaugurate passenger train services through video conferencing on Saturday. Indian citizens wishing to travel by this train to Kurtha in Nepal will have to carry a photo identity card issued by the central or state governments, voter identity card issued by the Election Commission of India, or identity cards issued by the Indian Embassy in Nepal. Indian Ministry of External Affairs, or MEA, had sanctioned 784 crore rupees for this ambitious project. Anuja Kumar for World News.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Indo-Nepal friendship beyond the ages. In conversation are Ranjit Rai, former ambassador, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the India-Nepal relationship and the friendship that has endured beyond ages. We also see that the Nepalese Prime Minister arrived in New Delhi today and he will be here till the 3rd of April. He will be meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the External Affairs Minister and the National Security Advisor will also call on the Nepalese Prime Minister. Ambassador Ray, when you see this visit of the Nepalese Prime Minister which comes at this crucial point, how do you see this in the context of the historic India-Nepal ties?
Well, any visit Prime Minister of Nepal is of great significance. And the fact that this visit is taking place after 3 or 4 years, first. And secondly, it is a visit 8 months after Prime Minister Deoba has taken over. It's a very, very significant visit. And, this is an opportunity to discuss the entire gamut of relations between the two countries and also to establish high-level personal political contact. So in every way, and as you said, particularly in the current global context, I think it's very important that, leaders, especially of neighboring countries, meet regularly.
Ambassador, we also see that visit happens just after the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Nepal. And we've also seen that there has been a recent outreach by China to improve its ties to Nepal, and that also kind of creates a bit of a worry, a bit of a tension for India. Would you agree that this is a point of tension for India, or do you think that our relationship stands on its own and China is not really a factor that we need to worry so much about?
Certainly, I think our relationship stands out on its own, and I don't think no other country can replace India's role in terms of the range, diversity, and depth of relationship. Having said that, there is no doubt that China is increasing its footprint in Nepal, and not only in terms of economic engagement, but also in terms of involvement in domestic political issues. And this is obviously a worrying sign, particularly since the India-China relationship, is at a low. The second factor that we need to be worried about is that, the growing contestation between the United States and China is also playing out in Nepal. I'm referring, to the $500 million grant project that the US was giving to Nepal and which China was opposing. This project has only been recently endorsed by the Nepalese parliament.
Ambassador Ray, we also see that the Nepalese Prime Minister, while in India, will also be visiting Varanasi, and this is also his first bilateral visit here as Prime Minister. Do you also feel that when we look at this visit and we also see that the outreach that India has made to Nepal over the last few years, this would actually fit into the category of saying this is a success of India's neighborhood first policy?
Well, absolutely. And, Varanasi holds a very special place in the hearts and minds of the people of Nepal. There is a very famous, in fact, I'm just coming back from Varanasi today. I lecture at the Banaras Hindu University. Now, the BHU has been home to generations of Nepali students, including 3 former prime ministers. If you go to Kashi, just next to the Vishwanath Dham corridor that has been built, there's a very beautiful Nepali temple at Lalita Ghat that was built by, a Nepali king several centuries ago. Very, very strong connect. And, during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Nepal, we started what is known as the Modi bus between Kathmandu and Kashi. There is also a sister city agreement. So Varanasi actually represents the spiritual, the cultural, the religious connect between the two countries. And, I think it's a very, very warm and positive gesture on the part of Prime Minister Deuba to visit Varanasi.
Ambassador Ray, we've also seen that internally, if we look at the political situation in Nepal, and that has been a matter of concern for a lot of people. There's been this political instability in Nepal. We have seen various prime ministers change. Do you think that is something that is a matter of concern for India because we share this long border, we also share this great relationship? Do you think this continuing political instability then raises questions?
It is very important for India that Nepal stable and prosperous. Because if it is unstable, Nepal becomes vulnerable to a lot of, external and other influences, which may be detrimental to Nepal's own interests and would also be detrimental to India's interests. So I do believe that, political stability in terms of policies is very, very important in Nepal. And of course, it's a work in progress. It takes time. Nepal has adopted a new constitution only in 2015. So, I guess it will still take some time. But I agree with you that a stable Nepal is certainly very much in India's interest as well.
Ambassador Ray, we also see that when the COVID crisis was at peak, India did reach out to Nepal and we extended all possible help. But sometimes, when one analyzes the India-Nepal relationship, one also gets a sense that maybe in Nepal there is a feeling of this big brother kind of an attitude which they feel comes from India. One, do you feel that would be accurate? Two, how do you see India then working on removing this perception which has built wrongly over the years?
I think it's very important to remove this perception. And as you rightly say, this perception exists. And there's a reason. Look at the asymmetry in size between Nepal and India. And if you're sitting in Kathmandu and looking southwards or eastwards or westwards, you see India. So India looms very, very large in Nepal's consciousness. And Nepal is a very proud country. It's a sovereign country. So we must treat Nepal exactly in that manner. So I think it's very important that in our behavior, in the conduct of our foreign policy, we are sensitive to this aspect of the relationship.
Ambassador Ray, would you also factor into the cultural linkages that have existed between India and Nepal? We've sometimes referred to this as the roti-beti relationship. How important or how much depth does this lend to the strategic relationship between two nations?
So the great thing about India-Nepal relationship is that it's not a relationship only between the governments. At a fundamental level, it's the relationship between the peoples of the two countries. As you know, there are open borders between our two countries and people can travel without visas, without passports. So this is a fundamental pillar of the relationship. And when we talk about Roti Beti, it relates not only to the Tarai plains, it is not only the people of the Nepalese Tarai and Bihar and UP. It extends throughout Nepal, along the western border, from Kathmandu Valley itself. There are a large number of Rana and princely families and other families that have intermarried into Indian families. So it's a relationship of, familial ties and kinship which exists between the people of Nepal as a whole and the people of India. Having said that, we shouldn't overemphasize this aspect. It's an important aspect. Now both countries are changing. You have new generations with new aspirations. And I think our relationship now needs to be rooted really in the economic engagement between the two countries, apart from the cultural and religious.
Ambassador, as you mentioned, that it is the economic aspect of this relationship which should be strengthened. One also hears sometimes the Nepalese side complaining that India's infrastructure projects, which we have launched in Nepal, have also taken a lot of time, or they're very slow to progress. Do you think this is a valid critique, and how should India focus on removing this one critique which comes up quite often?
Well, there is a point, project implementation is an issue between the two countries. And it's very important that we monitor the implementation of these projects. And that is why we've set up an intergovernmental committee between the two governments, which meets at regular intervals, sort out all issues and problems that arise in project implementation. That's a very important point. Secondly, on the economic relationship, I want to focus especially on hydropower. Nepal has a huge potential to generate electricity from its water resources, and India has a huge demand for electricity. So if we can jointly develop these projects, and I have in mind the Pancheshwar multi-purpose project on the river Mahakali. This is a 5,000 megawatt project. If we can generate this project, both countries will benefit enormously, and it will really cement the relationship and bring the two countries together.
Ambassador Nepal, going forward, as we see the relationship between India and Nepal, and we've also discussed some of the strains that have crept in the relationship over the last few years or decades, what would you define as the three focus areas that India and Nepal should try and work on so that this relationship grows in strength?
My focus really would be on the economic engagement. But if you were to ask a Nepali, and I've been seeing writings of a lot of Nepali commentators, they are talking about the 1950 treaty, they are talking about the report of eminent persons which has not been presented to the two governments. They're also talking about the boundary issues. So, whenever a relationship is so close and intimate, there are bound to be problems in the relationship, and our effort should be to resolve these problems without these problems, being allowed to become like cancerous sores in the relationship. So while these political and other problems need to be resolved, I think the prime focus of both countries should be on the economic engagement.
Ambassador, also, how much of credit would you give to the fact that we've also seen that the India-Nepal relationship has actually strengthened under the neighborhood first policy? And we've also seen that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also taken a lot of initiative, a lot of outreach towards Nepal, which was missing before he became PM. Would you say that it is also at the end of the day how much the leader pushes for the interest in the bilateral ties, and that is the core of what we have described as our neighborhood first policy?
Well, certainly the political leadership determines the direction of the relationship and the intensity. Prime Minister has visited Nepal 4 times. I don't know if there is any other foreign country that he has visited 4 times, and this clearly shows the emphasis and the priority that we attach to the relationship between India and Nepal. So, this is certainly, without political will, without, the very strong commitment of the political leadership, and in both countries. Without this, obviously the relationship will stagnate. There will be no dynamism in the relationship. So this is absolutely critical to, take the relationship to a higher level.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates, run the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alert.
Welcome back to World News. In Pakistan, opposition parties have lambasted Prime Minister Imran Khan for not fulfilling a single promise and enslaving the country to foreign institutions. Their comments came shortly after Imran Khan addressed the nation on Thursday. In his address, he claimed the opposition is acceptable to foreign powers as they were corrupt, but he is not bearable to them. Pakistan People's Party Chairman Bilawal Bhutto Zardari said that there is no safe passage for Imran Khan now. Mr. Bilawal said only Imran's resignation is the honourable exit for him. He said that Imran's attempt to polarize and scandalize the national security forums and institutions is outrageous. The PPP chairman said the Prime Minister has not fulfilled a single promise during his tenure and enslaved the nation to the International Monetary Fund IMF. In a tweet, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz PMLN Vice President Mariam Nawaz said that Prime Minister Imran Khan is on a rampage. She said he has to be gagged or muzzled before he makes a joke out of the country. She said this man is consistently proving that he does not deserve this highest office. The power crisis across Pakistan has intensified as the overall electricity shortfall reached 5,000 megawatts. All 9 power distribution companies, DISCOMs, on Thursday were facing long interruptions of electricity supply in urban and rural areas of the country. On the other hand, consumers blame the government for the current crisis. The situation is grave as big cities are facing hourly power outages during peak hours. Lahore Electricity Supply Company Limited, LESCO, is facing a shortage of 1,000 megawatt as the demand is 4,100 megawatt and the available power is 3,100 megawatt.
In Sri Lanka, the curfew imposed in Colombo and its suburbs to contain the protests against Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has been lifted on Friday. Protesters were demanding the resignation of the president. Police fired tear gas and a water cannon at the thousands gathered outside Rajapaksa's residence in Mirihina to contain the protests. The protesters allegedly stoned 2 army buses that were blocking the entrance to the residence. They also reportedly set fire to a bus and refused to let a fire truck pass through. Police said that 54 people have been arrested for the unrest. There has been a critical shortage of food and essential items, fuel and gas for weeks as the country grapples with the worst economic downturn since its independence. The Sri Lankan government said it is seeking a bailout from the International Monetary Fund IMF. IMF spokesman Jerry Rice on Thursday confirmed that such talks should begin in the coming days with Sri Lanka's finance minister. The Solomon Islands on Friday said it will not allow a Chinese military base in the country despite its plan to sign a security pact with Beijing. Pacific Islands nation Solomon's Prime Minister Manasseh Sogobe's office said the agreement does not invite China to establish a military base. Earlier, officials of the two countries prepared a draft agreement on security. Prime Minister Sogobe has not released details of the security agreement with China, but neighbouring countries have expressed concern over the draft. They are apprehending that it might allow Chinese Navy ships to replenish in the islands and consolidate its presence in the South China Sea. China has already established 20 points of military presence in the South China Sea, despite telling the United States it will not militarize the region.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said the National Education Policy 2020 caters to 21st century aspirations and takes India to the future. Interacting with students, teachers and parents in Pariksha Pe Charcha program in Delhi, Mr. Modi said the consultative process for the National Education Policy has been exhaustive and people across India were consulted for this. He said outdated ideas and policies from the 20th century cannot guide India's development trajectory in the 21st century. He said the country has to change with the times. The Prime Minister added that technology is not a bane and it should be welcomed and used effectively. A large number of foreign students studying in India virtually participated in the Pariksha Pe Charcha 2022 program. The World Bank on Friday approved financing of $250 million for Bangladesh to help it strengthen policies to sustain growth following the COVID-19 pandemic and enhance resilience to future shocks. The Bangladesh First Recovery and Resilience Development Policy credit in is first in a series of 2 credits to support fiscal and financial sector policies to enhance macroeconomic stability and sustain growth. It supports expanding and modernizing social protection programs and energy sector policies to improve efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These actions will help the country build resilience against future shocks, including climate change, said the World Bank.
The United Nations Cultural Agency said dozens of valuable churches, historical sites and museums have been damaged by the war in Ukraine, adding that it was particularly worried about the northern city of Chernihiv. Last month, UNESCO said it had bolstered protective measures for Ukraine's endangered cultural heritage in light of Russia's military operation, such as using a blue shield emblem to mark its cultural sites and monuments. The Sensex and the Nifty today climbed more than 1%. Both stock indices rose amid mixed cues from global share markets. The BSE Sensex closed above 59,250 points, while the NSE Nifty ended above 17,650 level. Brent crude prices plunged below $104 per barrel level. A report from the business desk.
The Sensex climbed 708 points or 1.21% to finish at 59,277. The Nifty also surged 206 points or 1.18% to settle at 17,670. Gold prices declined to 85 rupees at the multi-commodity exchange for April contracts. The precious metal was trading at 51,300 rupees per 10 grams. Silver prices also fell 500 rupees to 66,990 rupees per kilogram for May contracts when reports last came in. In global share markets, stock indices in Asia tumbled in the first quarter of this year, and investors do not expect a near-term rebound due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Higher interest rates and economic uncertainty also hurt investment sentiment. Asian stocks today traded mixed. China's Shanghai Composite Index climbed 0.9%. Singapore's Straits Times ended 0.3% up, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng added 0.2%. On the other hand, Korea's Kospi fell 0.7%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 slipped 0.6%. The European share markets were up marginally in intraday trade, and Brent crude prices today fell below $104 per barrel level. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $103.80 per barrel. Gaura Dhawan Lal for World News, All India Radio.
In the IPL cricket, Kolkata Knight Riders have defeated Punjab Kings by 6 wickets at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. Chasing victory target of 138, Kolkata Knight Riders overhauled the target by losing only 4 wickets and 33 balls to spare. Andre Russell scored 1731 balls for Kolkata. Earlier put into bat, Punjab Kings were all out for 137 runs in 18.2 overs. Bhanuka Rajpakshe scored 31 and Kagiso Rabada contributed 25 for Punjab, while Kolkata's Umesh Yadav picked up 4 wickets, giving away only for 23 runs. On Saturday, Mumbai Indians will face Rajasthan Royals at D.Y. Patil Stadium in Navi Mumbai, while Gujarat Titans will clash against Delhi Capitals in Maharashtra Cricket Association Stadium in Pune. Now let's take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in foreign press. Reuters writes that China's commercial hub of Shanghai ground to halt on Friday after the government locked down most of the city's 26 million residents to stop the spread of COVID-19. Prasar Bharati Bishing reports China reacted guardedly to the potential defeat of Prime Minister Imran Khan's government in Parliament.
Now let's have a look what made headlines in Nepal. The Rising Nepal Daily reports that Prime Minister Garba is paying an official visit to India, the invitation of the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Now let's have a look at what made headlines in Bangladesh. The family of slain Rohingya leader Mohibullah have left Bangladesh for Canada, reports Prathamolo.
A quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reiterates his call for early cessation of violence in Ukraine-Russia conflict, conveys to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov India's readiness to contribute in any way to the peace efforts. India's President Ramnath Kovind reaches Ashgabat in first leg of his 2-nation tour to Turkmenistan and the Netherlands. Nepal Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Doiba arrives in New Delhi on a 3-day visit to India. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar says this visit will further strengthen close neighbourly relations between the two countries. In Pakistan, opposition parties lambast PM Imran Khan for not fulfilling a single promise, enslaving country to foreign institutions. And in IPL cricket, Kolkata Knight Riders beat Punjab Kings by 6 wickets at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Cyprus. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.